Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases, presented by Community America Credit Union, investing in you. There is a lot going on. Community America knows this here in the Kansas City area. Baseball's been fun, depending on when you're listening to this, of course. But if you're listening to it as it comes out, we're in the middle of a playoff chase for the first time since the glory years of 2014 and 2015. Before I get going, I have a great baseball guest today. A shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City, making connections that matter. If you're in the hunt for a job, if you're looking for advice, looking for a resource, a great culture company, if you're looking to place someone, whatever it might be, give them a shout or check them out online at chiefofstaffkc.com. You can tell them I sent you or not, doesn't make a difference, but got a great relationship with them. Speaking of relationships, I always lead in by talking about connections and relationships. I don't know the number. I thought about spending time trying to figure it out. It would have taken too long. The amount of ball players that I have covered in my 17 seasons with the Kansas City Royals, that's just my time in Kansas City, is in the hundreds upon hundreds. I mean, to the point where there might even be a few that I don't remember. I'll look and say, wait a minute, they played here? Or who was that again? Sometimes guys are only up for a day or two. There are others that you kind of see right from the beginning, and you see the full career. And a lot of those guys now have appeared on this podcast. Big names like Lorenzo Cain and Eric Hosmer and Alex Gordon. And my guest today is one of those, part of one of the greatest bullpens in the history of Major League Baseball, and one of the big reasons that the Royals went to back-to-back World Series. What I love about my guest here today, whether you're a baseball fan or not, is I think everybody loves the Cinderella story, the work hard, outwork everybody story. The little guy that made it even when he was not given the chance to do that. And so I'm happy right now in retirement to be able to visit with Greg Holland. And I got a text from Greg this morning. Hey, what's the dress code for this thing? Which is a very baseball thing to ask, by the way. You know, like, what am I supposed to wear getting on the plane? Can I dress down? Can I dress up? And I said, you know what? Let's go like old school here. Throw on a hat, throw on something Royals, whatever it is. So he's got a Royals shirt on and a hat that says the Cats. I should have known that was the Catamounts, Western Carolina, the alma mater. Greg Holland, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
I love that you got the good backdrop with the Sports Illustrateds behind you, those years. It's crazy how fast life goes, because I can remember like yesterday you being the new kid on the block, coming up from the minor leagues, then being an all-star closer, then coming back to the Royals, and now being retired. What have all these years been like for you? I mean, it's been a dream, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to antiquate it, to be honest with you. I always just wanted to be as good as I could be, and I never knew where the end of that line was. So to look back on a career where made so many memories, met so many great people, and ended up winning a championship of all things, was icing on the cake. So it's hard to describe, but I'm enjoying retired life now. I actually feel like I'm more busy now that I'm not working than when I was. Nash is almost 10, Hunter's 7, so they're keeping me in check for sure.
And I'm glad to hear there was no surprise that the North Carolina accent, which would always disappear during the season and then make its return during spring training, having been home, it's got to be there permanently now, right?
I think so. I don't know. It just depends.
It is. It's all of you, which is a great thing. I think I want to get back to Nash later, because it was a rather famous birth, I guess I would say, in terms of the timing of navigating a playoffs. And then it's just unbelievable to me now that I saw you pop up at Kauffman Stadium, well, a couple times at least this summer. The first time we knew, because it was a 2014 reunion of the World Series team. But then I saw you pop up another day, and I just thought, one, thanks for calling. Two, I'm just kidding on that. But two, Nash must have some kind of tournament or something going on in terms of baseball. And I'm like, man, I don't know if that was even the case or not, but I know you guys are doing some travel, and he's involved in baseball. Like, you're full-fledged dad and I think coach and retired life now, right? Like, what's that like?
Well, I'm the assistant to the assistant, as I like to say. So when things get going bad, you can't point at me. You got to point at the head coach. But yeah, oddly enough, most of our travel's local, hour, an hour and a half stuff. Um, this tournament pops up in Kansas City. And I thought, oh, it'd be great. We'll go catch up. Well, you guys were on the road the entirety of the time we were there, the entire week. So we stuck around and caught the first Red Sox game that Monday, and then left. And I forgot how hot it gets in the summer there. So we did some sweating, but we had a good time. The kids really enjoyed it.
How cool is that for your kids now to be interested? You were telling me that, Nashville sometimes updates you on games from the night before, looking at highlights, which means he is well on his way. And I guess he probably remembers some of Dad playing. He retired a couple of years ago, but I would imagine that he, maybe Hunter too, are starting to take an interest. What is that like as a dad?
It's awesome. He's at the age now where he's got so many questions. I only have the answer for 10% of them. But he's gotten me back invested in watching the game and enjoying it. I played long enough to where it's like sometimes you just want to turn the TV off after the game and just do something other than baseball. But man, we've got the MLB package. He does the recap of every single game every morning before he goes to school, and if we can catch the Royals, we watch them. So we've probably watched 40 or 50 games, parts of this year. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it helps when they're winning too. Not that he wouldn't be paying attention if they were losing, but just to get back in the swing of things. And I guess some of these guys, I'm trying to think about this team. Well, maybe not. They've turned over so much, but I know you still have connections in the game, and you're not that far removed. But it was really interesting to watch you and Wade, for that matter, back towards the end of the run, and watching you guys as the mentors to some of those young guys. How strange was that? Because you were that kid once looking up to the guys that had been there, and now suddenly people are turning to you.
It wasn't strange for me. I've always thought that when it comes to like a veteran leadership, it's hard for a coach can't say, "Hey, Joel, go talk to this kid." It's got to be organic. And when you're down there, for a course of a season, you get to know the players. You start communicating as early as you can. And like I said, it becomes organic, and you learn from each other. I mean, I learned stuff about spin rates and things that at times I'd rather not know. But I like, it's a good idea that the younger guys saw the success that Wade and I had, and can ask us questions. And sometimes it's just as easy as getting the same advice but with a different verbiage from a different person. And I see that with my 10-year-old son. I can tell him till I'm blue in the face about something, and then another coach says something. He wants to listen to him instead of me, probably for the right reasons, because I'm always in his ear. But sometimes it's just talk to as many people as you can, and when something resonates and something sticks, go use it.
Essentially, it's like parenting. I mean, right when you said a different voice, I'm like, yeah, that's true of parents. And then suddenly there's another adult that says it and they listen. Wait a minute, I've been saying that for a long time. So that's life. That I think is universal. I want to go back to the beginning, and then we'll kind of work our way to where things went, because you truly did live the dream. I don't even know if you lived the dream, by the way. I mean, I don't even know what your dreams were. Like, I think most kids that are in the big leagues, not all, but most, or those of us that are around the big leagues that never played like myself, had some version of being in the backyard hitting a Game 7 World Series. I think it's probably more that than striking out the final batter to clinch a series or something along those lines. I know you grew up modestly, to say the least. I've spent a lot of time, as you know, with your father, one of my favorite people, and I'll still hear from him out of nowhere every now and then, which sometimes I think like a kid will give you a little eye roll, and me, I just love hearing from your dad and hearing all of that. What was childhood like for you and your brother Chase?
I mean, we grew up in the yard or on the ball field. I always had dreams of playing shortstop next to Chipper Jones. Luckily for me, I wasn't a great breaking ball hitter, so it worked out in my favor, I think. But yeah, that was always the dream. But then once I got into high school and college, that kind of went to the wayside, and I just wanted to see how far I could go. I didn't know if I was going to play after college. I didn't know I was going to play in college. I just wanted to keep playing as long as I could, and I let the rest take care of itself.
It did, and you always had this toughness to you. You know, you're not the biggest guy. We made so many comparisons to my broadcast partner Jeff Montgomery, who I know is someone that you looked up to in many ways, because you guys very similar in the sense that you went to schools from the same region, right? You went to Western Carolina. He went to Marshall. Both about 5'10"-ish, somewhere in that range. Both ended up being Royals closers. Didn't know that was ever going to happen. Both and right-handed, and just ended up with these incredible careers. At what point did you know, hey, wait a minute, I got a shot here to do something? Or as you're going through Western Carolina and then maybe getting some interest in the Royals draft you in the 10th round, he was 9th round, I think. At what point do you say, all right, I mean, at that point, you're not thinking I'm going to be an all-star closer. So what are you thinking?
It ebbs and flows, you know. I had no idea I had not thought about professional baseball in my junior year. I started getting some questionnaires and talking to some scouts. And matter of fact, they did the draft differently that year, and the first 5 rounds were the first day. And I thought I might go in the 4th or 5th round. I didn't. I was driving into town to get something to eat, and a Philly scout called me and asked me if I would sign for X amount of dollars in the 20th round. I think it was like $10,000. And I said, no. He said, okay, thanks. And he hung up the phone. And I remember driving home thinking, I'm not going to get drafted at all. So, you know, but fortunately, I ended up a Royal. And from there, you know, I just wanted to go pitch. And I really enjoyed my minor league experience. I never, when I got called up, I was throwing the ball really, really well in AAA. And I struggled immediately out of the gates when I got called up. So then I was like, well, can I do this? But I went to winter ball, played in Venezuela, got back in the strike zone, so to speak. And it didn't take much time heading into that following spring to really be like, okay, if I can just do what I'm good at doing, I don't know how well I can pitch up here, but I know I can pitch up here.
When was winter ball? Was that after 2010 or before?
Yeah, it would have been the winter 2010.
Okay, because you came up. I mean, you were up briefly in 10.
Yeah, and it was one of those weird deals where I was, like I said, I was pitching really well in Omaha. I had like 2 or 3 days off, and I actually walked into Jersh's office. He was the manager at the time there, and I'm like, hey, I got family in town. We were in Nashville. You think you can squeeze me in? Because I hadn't been pitching. And then the next day they called me up. And then they traded for Jesse Chavez, who I think is still pitching, by the way, which is wild.
Like there's millions.
And I went 3 or 4 more days without pitching. So I hadn't thrown in a game in like 7 or 8 days. And I really struggled out of the gate. But I started getting my wind about me the last few weeks. I ended up with almost a 7 ERA. So it didn't look good, but I did start to get more comfortable right towards the end of the season when I was getting, you know, regular touches. And then Venezuela was another one of those things where, you know, they told me to go learn how to command the fastball. And I did that. And, you know, I didn't make the team out of spring training. I think I threw 7 scoreless innings, and I was kind of blown away. But one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, oh my gosh, Ryan Stoneberg. We're stretching one morning, a couple of days before I got sent down, out there in Surprise, and he said, we were talking about prospects and making the team, and he's like, well, what if you don't make them? I don't know. He said you can go be ticked off that you didn't make the team, and you can prove them right, or you can go down there ticked off and you can prove them wrong. And that wasn't the exact quote, but it made a lot of sense in my head. It was like, okay, worst case scenario, I go to Omaha. I can be in my feelings about it, and I can pitch bad, and I can stay down there. Or I can go pitch well wherever I'm at, and I can get called up. And that really resonated with me. And, you know, after I got called up in 2011, I immediately started throwing the ball well, and I got more opportunities because of that, and one thing led to another.
That, by the way, is great advice. And I think a really good piece of information for young players that advice can come from a coach, can come from a former player, can come from the strength guy. It could come, and I'm not one that typically is giving players a whole lot of advice, but I could give that same advice. I might say something in passing to a player. It's not that I've played the game. It's that I've been around it so long that the good ones figure it out. It works out. It's not, you know, I'll give you this example because my mind goes there, but I think it's great advice for anybody that hits a wall or is told no, and there's still opportunities. Alec Marsh, who I think has among some of the best stuff on the Royals, but he's the young guy on the staff, and you know he was one of the 5 this year. And then they trade for Michael Lorenzen, and they send him down. Well, Michael Walker, who you might have been teammates with, were you teammates with Walker?
Yeah.
Great guy. I mean, there's a guy that's been around the league a long time, and he talks to him right away, and he says to him, "Listen, you're going to be mad, but go down there. They did this to me my rookie year. This happened to me my rookie year, and I was devastated, and I was so upset. But I went down there, I put in my work, and they needed me. I came back." And he ended up being the NLCS MVP. And the whole message was like, this happens. It's just part of the process. Trust it. Go do your thing. Keep, stay positive and all that. And it's hard though, right? It's hard in those moments to feel that and understand it. It's so much easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But keep your ears open, like you said. I mean, that's life in general. People get passed up for jobs in the real world all the time that they should have. You just got to keep grinding and stay after it. It's just like having a bad outing. You blow the game. You can be upset about it, but there's got to be a turning point, whether it's when you go to bed or when you get in the shower or the next morning, where you've moved on, you've learned from what you can learn from. And now we got to turn the page and worry about today. And like you said, it's easier said than done, but it doesn't just happen in baseball and sports. It happens in life in general. You just got to grind it out and go do the best you can do today.
How were you able to do that? Because it's one thing to be sent back down to the minors. I don't know if that's better or worse, because now you're going down there and you got to move back in and all those type of things. But blowing a save is something that I don't know that there are a lot of positions in sports that are relatable to the closer. And I guess this could be true of a guy that's in the 7th inning or 8th inning. It's just different in the 9th. I mean, they give you a blown save in the 7th too, but there's something different about the 9th. You're 3 outs away, or maybe if it's a little earlier, 4 outs away. And it's all on you, whether that's fair or not. I mean, you're going to be the one that gets it. You're the one that all the media goes to. How often do they talk to the closer after he gets the save? Every now and then I might have asked you for something, but it's because I talked to somebody else the other day and I needed somebody new. I mean, it's a role that gets attention when you don't do your job, kind of like a field goal kicker, although I would argue that maybe you do more than that, then it's not just one kick. How did you handle, 1, that pressure, and 2, the failure?
Well, I always said it's easy to handle when you blow 1 save. It's harder when you blow 2, and then if you have a bad week, it's really difficult. You just got to be able to look in the mirror and realize I put in the work. I was ready to pitch. Because if you're not, then your head's spinning. But I always did really enjoy the accountability aspect of it. No one cares if we made 4 errors in the first 8 innings. No one cares how many runners we left on base. It's 2-1. We're supposed to win, and the good players that are out there on the field, if they go 3 for 4, but they strike out with a man on 3rd and 1 out, they feel responsible too. I always just enjoyed that. There's a fine line between, for me, when I realized that I could call being nervous adrenaline, it really helped me a lot. Because it just put it in a more positive aspect. And that's where you want to be. I tell young players all the time, if you want to be good, you can be. But if you want to be great, there's a couple more steps. We had a young team when I came back, and there was a couple situations where it's like, hey, I threw yesterday. He asked me if I was okay today. I'm like, I know the game's changed, but once you start pitching well, there's going to be more asked of you. That's just part of the game. So you got to be able to answer the bell. You don't want to throw 5 days in a row if your arm's fatigued, but be ready to throw 2 in a row, 3 out of 4, that kind of thing, because that's what the great ones do. and enjoy that and embrace it.
And you had I think almost all for better. I don't know if any for worse. You had this toughness about you. I always chalked it up to your childhood, and like I said, modest upbringing, had to fight for everything. I don't mean that literally, but or maybe I don't know. But I mean you guys had to battle. You guys had to scrap, and so I've said this many times before that you're one of the toughest players that I've ever covered in my career. You were that classic guy that would throw until your arm fell off, which did basically happen too, right? Not literally, but it did in 2015. It cost you from being in the playoffs, but I don't think you were ever going to back down because it wasn't in you. That's at least the way I read it. I'm curious your mindset. And so when I say like mostly for the good, did you have the ability to say, yeah, no, I can't take it today? Maybe over time you did. I don't know. I mean, like to me, you look like a guy that would battle to the death.
Well, that was to my own detriment sometimes, but that was kind of the life of throwing the last inning. It's like, okay, if I don't pitch today, we might win the next 4 games by a dozen runs, and I don't pitch either. Or so you kind of gotta. What is it? Ned used to say something about make hay while you can. And that was kind of my mindset. But even if your arm's dragging a little bit and they tell you got the day off, when you're up 2-0 in the 8th, all of a sudden you feel a lot better. You're like, okay, I can do it. Get me in the game. Get me in the game. I know you told me I had the day off, but I want the ball. But going back to being able to deal with the failure part of it, that's the beautiful game of baseball. You play 162 games. You don't have time to dwell on it. You've got to be prepared to pitch the next day. So even after a bad outing, I wake up and be like, I'm probably in the game today. So I've got to get ready for today. And that's the part that's better than being a starting pitcher. You have I like being able to, as a starting pitcher, knowing your schedule, your workout routine and all that stuff. But you have a bad outing, you got a sour taste in your mouth for 4 days instead of, a couple hours.
I want to go back just a little bit to one other thing. I mean, and I don't know if I necessarily viewed you as a chip on your shoulder kind of guy. Maybe so, but like you didn't. Some guys have that chip on the shoulder and they're just angry. I never saw you as being angry, although maybe the chip on the shoulder was just motivation. I mean, nothing you've had along the way was handed to you. Eventually, you built the reputation, right? 3 All-Star games and reliable closer and all of that. But I mean, you talked about worrying about not even being drafted when the Phillies guy called you. But what about going to Western Carolina? Nothing was given to you there either, was it?
No, I walked on. I don't even know if they still do walk-on tryouts, but that's kind of what I did. I threw with my high school roommate. We roomed the first semester there at Western, and I threw with him. I called and found out when walk-on tryouts were, and I took ground balls at third, short, second, took fly balls in the outfield, and then I pitched. And Paul Menhart was there, and we were going to take batting practice. He's like, "Hey, you sure you want to hit?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I can hit." He's like, "Well, I think you should probably just throw and not hit." He's like, "You're not going to do yourself any favors." I'm like, "Oh, I can hit." But needless to say, I didn't hit good enough to be a hitter. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I just knew that financially speaking, I could make the first 2 years at Western work. It actually was going to be cheaper for me than going to Blue Ridge Community College, which is the only team that wanted me to play out of high school. But the way it worked out, I had some 4-year public university scholarship stuff set up that wasn't going to work at Blue Ridge Community College. So I was like, well, I'm going to Western, and we'll see if I continue to play or not. And that's just how it shook out.
I was looking real quick as you were talking on Baseball Reference to see if there were ever any at-bats or plate appearances in the big league. It was a big 0, right? You didn't get
0.
one?
Yeah. At a certain point, I thought, I got older, I thought maybe I could probably lobby for one and maybe get one. But then I was like, it would actually be better to play 10 years and never get that bad,
I think towards the end, Greinke, everybody assumed that he was lobbying to get an at bat. But just give him an at bat. You know, he's got 9 homers. You let him in, and at least from what I'm told, I mean, Zach doesn't tell anybody this type of stuff. But from what I'm told, they might have given him that, and he didn't want it because I'm guessing at that point he had been so out of practice that he didn't want to deal with the results.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. I don't know if you remember Kelvin Herrera trying to hit Sergio Romo in the World Series, but it's like, do I really want to, dust off the cleats and step in the box and see some stuff like that? Absolutely not.
You mentioned Herrera, and I've got my HDH bobblehead. Those were from this year. I'll break out. I mean, most people aren't watching this on YouTube. If they are, they'll see it. But here's my Holland right there, and with the 56. And these were fun because, I mean, people love collecting all the bobbleheads and all that type of stuff. But and the Royals and teams throughout baseball do a great job with those. But you guys, it was so unique because it wasn't just the one of you; it was the 3 of you. I think you could argue in some ways with one of those years 4 of you because you had Hoach in there too. I mean, it was you guys, or at least the construction of that roster and the way bullpen was used in those years changed all of baseball. I know for a fact. I mean, I had a reliever on another team that was like a 7th inning guy. One year said to me, I got like in 2016 or 17, I need to send the Royals a thank you note because I got an offer in free agency as like a 7th inning guy for closer type of money because everybody suddenly wanted a closer type in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. What were those days like with Kelvin Herrera, Wade Davis, yourself, and then that nickname of HDH?
It's special. I love those guys to death. We pushed each other in the right ways. Really enjoyed being in the bullpen with them. It's hard to describe it. I mean, it truly a gift. I mean, you never know how it's going to work out. But Wade was a starter in Tampa and came over, and no, I don't think anyone would have envisioned him being as dominant a reliever as he ended up being. But I think for the whole team, it was a mindset. It was like, hey, we don't need a 4-run inning. We don't need to bang a bunch of homers. Let's put some at-bats together, get on the board early. And if we've got a lead after the 5th inning, we like our chances. And I think that was the mentality of the whole team. And it took a lot of pressure off of everyone. It took pressure off me too, knowing that, if we've got a lead in the 5th or the 4th even, some of those bullpens we had were ridiculous. Mm-hmm. We were still going to have the lead in the 9th. And then it was my job just to do what everyone else had already done, throw up a 0 and go home and, rinse and repeat kind of thing. But I learned a lot from those guys. I hope they learned from me. But the biggest thing was just the mentality, the preparation, the work, and then we looked like robots. But there's an internal clock that goes off, and everybody starts going about their business. It gets a little quieter. The things that are said are questioning. Okay, they're going to pinch hit this guy here in this spot. Give me a couple quick anecdotes on what should I be doing to get this guy out once I get ahead. It was all business, but it was also really fun. But to a T, every man down there knew how to kind of turn that on and off switch when they needed to.
Intense group, but also fun. I mean, bullpens are, I only know this from being around the game long enough. I'm not hanging out there. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Most people would find that enjoyable. And I've got a million stories from Monty, obviously, and those stories are amazing. But because it's a different fraternity, right? I mean, it's a fraternity within the fraternity. I think all of you major league ball players in some form or another are in this fraternity because there are only so many people in the world at any given point that are doing it at this level. And I always say the worst guy on a roster is better than just about anybody in the world. And there are guys in AAA that never make it that would crush anybody around the world. I mean, the talent level is ridiculous. But now you get within that group, those 7 or 8 guys out in the bullpen, add in the bullpen coach, the bullpen catcher, and it's a unique group. What is life like in the bullpen, especially innings 1 through 5 or whatever you get out there. Some closers or some later inning guys don't even go out there till the second, third inning. When did you go out? When would you walk out? I don't remember.
Well, once I started having back issues, it was the fourth. But I never was a guy that I wasn't just sticking around the clubhouse just to not be in the bullpen. We were getting work done, and I had a laundry list of things I like to get accomplished. And a lot of that stuff was, maintenance to get the body warm, but a lot of it was just to keep my mind off the game, stay relaxed. I don't want to be tense for 3 hours and then try to go pitch. But it is kind of a learning process. There's times to relax and enjoy yourself cut up, because you can't, 162 games from the first inning through the ninth, sometimes extra innings, you can't just be locked in the whole time. I think it wears you down too much mentally. So you got to be able to know, if I'm a young guy and the starter starts struggling, I need to lock it in. I need to start getting ready to pitch because it might be my time. Guys that know they're on the back end, or if they're throwing, you're going to face these lefties in a close game. You start looking at the lineup. Where's that 3, 4, 5 hitter going to fall? Is it going to fall in the 6th or 7th? Then start preparing from there. And the communication aspect from the coaching staff and the pitching coach pays dividends in that aspect too, because it's really hard to be ready to throw the 3rd inning or the 8th inning. You want to. I always like to say, I don't care when I'm throwing. I just want a time frame and a situation. And if it's up 10, down 10, that's fine. But I want to be prepared as I can without having to stay loose and fully committed the entirety of the game.
Monty always said that the non-save situations where you had to get work in were the worst. Was that true too?
Yeah, and oddly enough, when I was in Arizona, Torey Lovello hated to do it. And I said, listen, Torey, I had rather come in and give up a run or 2 runs in a 5-run game than to take that day off and then have 4 or 5 days rest when you really needed me in a 1-run game. So there's always that battle, because as a manager, you're like, well, we might need you for the next 3, but I'd always rather be a little sore, a little stiff on that 3rd day if necessary than to be too fresh. But yeah, you kind of can let your guard down. And I always like to say a 2-run lead is ideal for me. 3 feels like you've almost got 1 run too many to play with. And then I always inevitably ended up with the tying run at the plate somehow. So I kind of, I was a victim of knowing that we had a 3-run lead a lot of times.
Oh, the mind games with all of it. All right. A couple more before I get to what I call my baseball themed questions. How special were those teams in 14 and 15?
Look at there's got to be a video out there. I mean, when that wild card game, man, to see the city come together like that, it gives me goosebumps right now just talking about it. It wasn't just the players getting to do something awesome. It was the culmination of years and years of buildup. And I used to say, like, when they were introducing our names before we played Oakland, it felt like the stadium was closing in on me. It was just the wildest experience. And it couldn't have happened with a better group of guys that knew each other, loved each other, would go into battle with each other. And the good teams have that kind of chemistry. It's hard to analytically put your finger on that, but it resulted in a lot of winning for us.
Mm-hmm. And the next year, 15, which is the year that everybody celebrates, I know had to have been mixed emotions for you, just because of the grind, right, to get there. I was looking earlier at your last game of that season, and I'm like, I know it was late, and I know it was in Detroit. I don't know why I remember that. I just remember talking about essentially your arm was falling off and you were still pitching. How much of that is true, and what do you remember about all that?
I remember it sucked for I couldn't come up with a better term. It was just a tough situation. I initially had some elbow issues in September of 2014. And that year, the way the playoff race set up, we gave me some time. We weren't. I'm forgetting who won the division, but we weren't catching them. We were kind of locked into that wild card spot, so I got some time
Detroit,
off.
right? I think it was Detroit.
That sounds right, but it was one of those situations where I got the time I needed to make it through the playoffs. Then coming into spring training, I was in a pretty good spot, and I strained my pec. And then when I come off the deal from that, it was kind of just an uphill battle. I couldn't ever get back to where I'd left spring training. So there was a couple months there where it was uncomfortable. I was getting through it, but then it got to the point where it's like, we're costing the team some wins here, and you don't want to do that heading into October. So it was a tough spot for me personally, but watching Wade get the final out in the World Series and to put an exclamation point on that team was special. Probably different for me than a lot of guys, but I'm so glad we closed the deal the way we did. It would have been tough to have missed the playoffs and not won the World Series. It would have been much tougher to go to back-to-back World Series without getting a ring. So, and that was that team atmosphere. It's like, hey, we'll pick up the slack. We had Hochaver had a great year. Ryan Madsen had a great year. It just next man up kind of mentality. And luckily for us, we had a lot of good players and we had a lot of depth.
I remember that game. I don't remember all the details. I'm looking at it right now, and you guys ended up losing in the 12th inning. I don't even know if you were supposed to be available that day or what the deal was, but you come in there and that was the last of it. You went 2/3 of an inning, 3 hits, 2 runs. I just remember, and I don't know, how your family or your wife Lacey dealt with it, if they would read stuff. But I was on social media a lot. I don't think you were. I don't know, but again, the role of a closer, it's like they love you. I'm not talking about everybody, but just in general, like the average fan, they love you until you don't do it, then they hate you. And I just remember thinking, like, just the human side of it, like this dude is in so much pain and he's sacrificing everything for his team. And I think if people understood that, they'd be a little bit more empathetic. Are you even aware of that as it's going on? Or are you like, what's the, I know physically you had to have been miserable, but like, what's the mindset?
A lot. I had a lot going on in my head. It had nothing to do with outside influences. Obviously, we're just wanting to be as good as I could be and help us win games. And it got to the point well before that where I realized that I wasn't giving us the best chance to win. As far as that game goes, all I remember is kind of a hanging slider hooked into left field, if I'm not mistaken. And the guy's name was really close to Miguel Cabrera, but it wasn't Miguel Cabrera. It was a young guy. But interesting story in Cleveland that year. It might have been a couple of weeks before that. I was struggling, and Kyle Turner come out at a certain point. He's like, "Hey, are you done?" And it was kind of that like, "Hey, we need to get this taken care of" kind of deal. And the infield comes in. I'm like, "No, you're not taking me out of this game." I said, somebody's going to have to make a play, though. Who can make a play? And then Moose is like, "I'll make a play." And then Esky's like, "I'll make a play." And then, that story, that's resonated with me my entire career. And it just goes back to the team we were. They had my back, and I think everyone kind of knew what was going on. Maybe didn't know the severity of the issues I had going on, but had my back there and were ready to go to war for me.
Kind of like that first game, the infamous, or I don't know that it's infamous, the Ned Yost, Unieski, Betancourt double play story, right? I don't know how much of that is true or how much you remember your first game.
The entire thing is true. I like to say that was one of my 9 double plays in my entire career.
So the story basically is that you're in trouble, right? You're, at least in Ned's mind, this nervous young kid that's just come up, and you're in a jam, and he comes out and asks, says whatever he said. I don't know. What do you remember about it?
Well, I spent my entire career, the majority of it, trying to slow the game down, because that was, in a nutshell, I feel like most young pitchers feel. I think Rajah Davis was the first batter I faced. I quickly jump up 0-2, and I'm licking my chops. I'm like, oh, this is no different than what I've been doing at Omaha. Well, next thing you know, I've walked him and given up a hit, and I've got to run in. And I couldn't really tell you the sequence of events leading up to the mound visit. I just knew that in a split second, I was in real trouble. And Ned comes out. He's like, hey, get back in the zone, get a fastball down away, get you a double play here. Who wants it? And Bancorn's like, hit it to me or something like that. Just, just real generic, like hit it to me. And I think I threw it right down the middle. He beats it in the ground. We get out of it. I only give up one run. But yeah, that was kind of a whirlwind of emotion where I was like, okay, I'm locked in. Like, this is over. I'm in the big leagues, baby. And the next thing I know, I'm like, oh, here comes the manager.
Which, oh, by the way, the manager doesn't usually come out for a pep talk. That might happen like 3 times a year, if that. It's usually the pitching coach. So that one all worked out, a fun story. All right, we'll start to wind things down. I always say this to my baseball guests on this podcast, that I always ask my guests these baseball-themed questions as if they never played the game at this level, meaning that I'll ask a guest, what's the biggest home run you've hit in your career? And it's, I landed this job with blah, blah, or I did this or I did that. Obviously, you weren't hitting home runs, but you made it big. You had this dream career. What was, to you, what was the most significant moment or your most special moment?
That, I don't know if I can put my finger on one thing individually. That 2014 playoff run was really special. I mean, you couldn't write a story any better for me personally how that shook out. I mean, we beat Oakland, one of the greatest games I've ever seen. I flew home. Lacey gave birth to our first son. The next day, I'm flying to Anaheim by myself. Plane issues. They have to bring in another plane. I get to the field in the 5th inning. I'm trying to let the security guard know that even though I have a backpack on and I'm running towards him, I'm actually a player, and I know the game has started, but I'm actually a player. Get in there, and I think, was it Moose that hit the home run?
Yeah.
We won back-to-back games in extra innings and just let the air out of that building both nights. I think Moose hit the first one, maybe Haas hit the second one the next night. And you want to talk about scared, like, this is not the one to blow, okay? The California kid just hit a homer in 10th. Go finish this one out. And I love that emotion. And we did it, man. We rolled through there, and I wish we would have got I wanted to face San Francisco again, because that put a bad taste in my mouth. But that run, having Nash in the middle of it all, it was crazy.
I mean, I just think, like, it's not full circle, but now Nash is the kid that's updating you on the games from the night before. Like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he's asking me stats and stuff. I'm like, I don't know these stats, man. I know the game of baseball, but I don't know what, Bobby Witt's hitting. I know it's like 1 million right now, but like I said, he's got me more involved in the game. We've been watching a lot of games, and I've really enjoyed sitting down watching it with him asking me 1,000 questions, kind of seeing how he sees the game and stuff. And he's a true fan. And I remember being that way with my dad watching Braves games growing up.
Mm-hmm. Just looking back at the box score from that Angels game, for a guy that had been flying all day and playing issues and arriving once the game has already started, which, if there's one position to arrive while the game is going, it would be relief pitcher, because you may not be needed until much later. So no big deal. You come in the 11th inning after Moose had homered in the top of the 11th and strike out Gordon Beckham, strike out Eric Ibar, and then the power hitting Josh Hamilton you get to pop up all in a day's work. I don't know what you felt like when your head hit the pillow that night, but that was quite a day and quite a 48 hours or so with Nash being born. I
was exhausted. I got 2 IVs, and the bus didn't wait on me, so I rode in the back of the car with Nick Kenny and Kyle Turner back to the hotel. Wow. So when you say place kicker, it's more like lineman. It's more like snapper. It's like, you better get it done, but hey, we got to get some sleep. We'll see you tomorrow.
All the things that nobody knows. Unbelievable. That was such a run. All right. I always ask guests too about a swing and a miss, and a lot of times it's business related or anything. Did you have a moment that I don't know if regret's the right word, but a moment you wish had gone differently. I know there are a lot of them as a relief pitcher. And I've had Haas on this show, by the way. I'm not suggesting this is one. And I still,
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, to this day, I can't get him to admit that he wouldn't do the post-game interview with me because he didn't want to show you up. He still claims it's because they took his shirt off and he didn't want to do an interview without a shirt on, which I totally call BS on. He didn't want to do, for those that don't know, Greg had gone on and he came back to Kansas City and gives up a grand slam to his friend Eric Hosmer, and Haas didn't want to show you up. He didn't want to be basking in the glory at your expense. Anyway, I'm not suggesting that's the moment, but I'm just calling BS on him. I wanted that to be on the record once again because he was trying to protect you a little bit. Do you have a moment that stands out to you?
That one was terribly embarrassing. If he didn't want to show me up, he could have beat it in the ground to first. Yeah, I messed up some contract stuff, but that's probably too personal to get into on the podcast. I hung a bunch of sliders. The one that really, really bothered me, when I went to St. Louis, I signed on opening day, and I went down to Florida, and I threw 2 innings with their low A affiliate or high affiliate, whichever one's in Florida. And they called me, asked me if I was ready. I knew I wasn't. But, at that point in my career, I was like, it's a 3-hour flight. I'll figure it out on the way up there kind of thing, And I get into the clubhouse. These guys have had all spring with each other. They've got that commonality going on. They've already played 3, 4, 5 games. And I think that night I walked 4 guys. And that just started a chain of events that was epically bad. I'm still embarrassed at how I threw the ball in St. Louis. And I just wish I would have been like, yeah, I need a couple more touches. But it's kind of like telling the coach you need a day off. I didn't really have that button. But it would have been better, more beneficial to take an extra week. Maybe that would have worked out differently for me and for the Cardinals.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it all worked out. Maybe not in that situation, but an incredible career.
I like to joke with Lacey and tell her that we got to make sure we don't have to stop in St. Louis to get gas anytime we're on a road trip because I'm a wanted man in those parts.
Hopefully they've moved on. They've got other issues at this point, but yeah, I guess they never forget. That's okay. The last baseball themed question I always ask, and it came really as an inspiration from your teams, your championship teams, was about small ball, which I know like small ball is usually considered more hitters, but to me, I took it a step further because, when people had asked me how the Royals won, it so often will come back to chemistry. It would so often come back to doing the little things right in the culture that Dayton Moore had built. And so to me, small ball represents the culture. Like, this, you've been in so many different clubhouses now, and the culture, the chemistry is going to be different on every single team, even from year to year. There was something special about that group. What does small ball mean to you, or what made that group so unique? Because I'm pretty sure that you would say, I'm putting words in your mouth, so you can definitely correct me here, that group was different 14, 15 than any that you'd ever seen.
Yeah, it definitely was. I played on parts of 12 seasons, 6 or 7 different teams and organizations. There was something you couldn't quite put your finger on. Chemistry is the word, but it's not really the word. But when I think of small ball, I think of not just bunting a guy over. It's just finding a way to win. It's your 6-hole hitter hitting a solo home run to tie the game in the 9th. It's your center fielder tracking down a ball that no one else is going to get to. It's Salvi throwing out a base stealer, a guy who doesn't get thrown out stealing. We played the game the right way. We didn't give up extra bases kicking the ball around. We made the right play all the time. We had plenty of big innings, but we knew we didn't have to have big innings to win. We could find other ways to win. If we get one here and one there, next thing you know, we're up 5-2, and the game is, at that point, it's pretty much over. And it was just a mentality. It's like If it takes a 3-run homer to beat you tonight, we will. If it takes a shutout to beat you tonight, we'll do that too. And that's kind of the small ball thing that comes to mind for me.
Truly, truly remarkable years, and I think for everyone, whether it be fans or someone like me, to be along for the ride, to be a part of it was something that I know I'll never forget. That I think everybody feels that way. All right, we'll wrap it up with 4 quick final questions as we round the bases. The first one is this: what was it like to be back with so many of those guys for the 2014 reunion? They'll do it again for the 2015 reunion. I imagine the stories are going to continue to grow and grow, but was that chemistry, that camaraderie still there with the group?
Yeah, dude, it was awesome. It was absolutely special. You forget just how much the game of baseball means to you, and not just the playing part of it, but the people you meet and the bonds you build. And it was like we never skipped a beat. Can't wait to do it next year.
All right, second question as we round the bases. Thoughts on Salvador Perez, a guy that you have known almost as long as anybody. I'm guessing you might have maybe even threw to him in the minors. I'd have to look that up. But if not, you certainly threw to him beginning in 2011. He's still doing this. I loved when the reunion was going on. Guys were giving him grief. Come on, stay out with us. Let's go out and hang out. Let's go play golf in the morning. He goes, guys, I got a game to catch tomorrow. What are your thoughts on this guy? Because he's going to the Hall of Fame.
The best I've ever seen. I didn't start pitching in major leagues till 2010, but he's the best I've ever seen, hands down. He can beat you with his bat, beat you with his glove, and he still has that boyish love for the game of baseball. And I think that resonates with the people around him. He loves the game. He plays it hard, but he has fun while he's playing it hard. And when he gets into the Hall of Fame, I'm going to make every effort I can to be there for it.
Me too. I don't know what I'll be doing at that point, if I'll still be doing this, I'll be on to something else, but I will be there, and I know a lot of people will, because he's what a joy in every single way. I think your observation on that from the inside is my observation from my perspective on the inside, and I tell people all the time what you see as fans is what it is.
And how special will it be to watch him lead another group of young guys into a playoff run? He's
so energized right now. It's like I had said to him early in the year, I'm like, how much more fun is this? He goes, I always have fun, Joel. All right, fine. How much easier is it to have fun? He said, yes, it's easier. Winning certainly makes things easier. That's the beauty of Salvi, is that he has more fun than anybody, but he also wants to win as much as anybody, and he's figured out that balance. Okay, third question as we round the bases, a little blip on each. We're talking HDH here. How would you describe Kelvin Herrera? The mayor, right? He's a mayor now in the Dominican.
One of the most underrated funny people you'll ever meet.
I'm glad you went there, because nobody knows it, and I always heard it, and I would see it too. Sometimes it could be language barrier, although his English was okay. Certainly could have great conversations with him. Expand on that, because I don't know anyone I've ever met from the inside, being in a clubhouse or a bullpen with him, that doesn't first describe him, not the fastball, not the arsenal. They describe the sense of humor.
It's just like it's a highly intelligent, just like what's the word? What does it say? Dry sense of humor. It's quick to the point, but it's hilarious. And his delivery is impeccable, and his timing's good too. But fierce competitor, man. I mean, but I assumed you already knew that.
Yeah, we all knew that, and man, I love that dude. He was so much fun, and just appreciated being around him all the time. I was sad when they traded him. I was. There's some guy. I mean, it's just work. I don't want to say it's just work. It's part of the game, so we become numb to it, all of us. And that one got me a little bit that day when they moved Kelvin, I believe, to Washington. Wade Davis. I want to preface it with this real quick. They did a father's trip one year in Baltimore, and so they had the dads hitting in BP, and I came out there in shorts, and they invited us too, and I'm just minding my own business in the outfield, and they start screaming for me to come in and hit. I'm like, I'm not an athlete, no, but they made me come in, and I'm hitting in the cage, and the two people are at the plate, and the two people standing behind the cage, the wonderful, warm and fuzzy personalities of Ned Yost and Wade Davis. That's all that's behind there. I'm like freaking out, and I just hear Wade deadpan. You ever done this before, Joel? I'm like, oh my God. And I did get a ball out of the infield, which is more than Ned Yost could have said. Anyway, give me what you got on Wade.
Closet germaphobe. Always had to make sure the hot tub was completely clean. And sometimes the game would start and he'd be like, especially on the road, like, I got to drain this and restart it. I'm like,
no way.
Well, we're alternating, so there's not going to be time for me to get in there. Well, it's disgusting. Okay, so slight germaphobe. As far as relievers go, he might be the best pitcher I've ever seen. He was a mentalist. You know, he was a thinker, but I never tried to be because I knew I couldn't execute pitches at the level that he could. So he could watch video and he could break down a hitter. I just tried to beat him with heart and guts, and but he knew how to do it. You know, the old school Greg Maddux way. He could. His stuff was electric. Obviously, he didn't need to do that, but he could pitch at such a high level and he could process the information. And he was very, very special in that regard.
I remember a conversation I had with him in spring training early on when he told me, I'm not going to be a reliever. I don't want to do that. I want to start. And I'm like, oh, you only ended up going on to be one of the better closers, you know, in your time in the game, both of you guys. I mean, it was amazing. All right, I got the first two. How about Greg Holland?
Smoke and mirrors. I don't know. I just I love competing, and I tell young pitchers all the time. I know hitters are so good now. Like, you know, I saw the other day. I can't even remember who we were watching, but the guy's got a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. He throws 6 straight breaking balls, and the first fastball he throws just gets absolutely whacked, which didn't happen, you know, up until just recently. You could still throw it by guys. So I know hitters have gotten better, but I used to go into a game thinking, I do 2 things really well. I throw my fastball down and away really well, and I can throw my slider at the bottom of the zone and below the zone. And there are not 4 hitters in a row that are willing to take my fastball away and hit it into right field. And if there are, then I'll start making adjustments from there. I see a lot of young guys now that they look at scouting reports and they think, you know, this and that and bang and boom. And I'm like, you've got too much going on. It's really, like I said, Wade Davis is one of the few relievers that I've ever seen that could do all the things that a scouting report says. So you got to stick to your guns, and that's what I always did. You know, there's certain days where you don't have feel for the slider and you just got to go out there and bang a bunch of fastballs. But at the end of the day, I'm doing what I do well, and I'm going to compete as hard as I can compete, and we'll see where the chips fall.
All right, last question, my walk-off. And again, because these podcasts live forever, I don't want to be completely in the moment and don't know today what things are going to look like in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. But we'll just keep it maybe a little bit more generic so it could come up year after year, hopefully. But when a team is in a race, as you and I are speaking right now, the Royals are for the first time in years. But what's the best advice you can give to a team that is going through it? They've been grinding for 5 months. The ups and downs are still coming. We all know that once you get in, anything can happen. But how do you get there? Now we're past the dog days of summer. Now we're at something that's maybe worse or maybe better. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. How do you do it?
A couple of things come to mind. You've got to take care of today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about a 3-game deficit or a 6-game deficit or a 1-game deficit. Take care of today. Just win today, and then when today's over, win tomorrow. But also, you've got to learn. You've got to make sure you're enjoying it. Enjoy the fact that you're in a battle. You know, instead of worrying about losing, think of all the good stuff that can happen. Enjoy September baseball. It's the best. It's the best month. There's 12 of them, and it's the best. You know, we got deer season rolling around the corner. Weather's starting to cool off a little bit. We're heading into October. Everybody's posturing to get in the playoffs. So enjoy it, and don't get ahead of yourself. Just win today.
It's great advice from a guy that has been there, three-time All-Star, a world champion, and one of my favorites. I got a lot of favorites from that team, but there are a handful of guys that I have been fortunate enough to stay in touch with. I tell people all the time that, I'm older than all these guys, although the further along you guys get from the game, feels like the closer you're getting to me, or at least where I was when you guys were there. You're dads now, and you're doing all the other stuff, and I don't want to say a little bit more mature. Yeah, I do. A little bit more mature as well. You're living the rest of a normal life. And I feel so fortunate to have been able to have been along for the ride, to be able to get to know the guys like you, to be able to see you come back to town, to be able to tell these stories, and to have had that bond that we all did. I'm not one of the guys. I'm not one of the coaches, but I think all of us from the broadcast side, the media side, we spend all those days with you and get to know your families, your wife and your dad, your parents, your brother, all that type of stuff. So, and now your kids. So it's great to see what you're doing now post baseball. You look great, you sound great, and I'm excited for whenever you come back to town. But Greg, thanks so much for doing this. A lot of fun stories, a lot of smiles, a lot of insight, and hopefully the Royals will be getting back to that level that you guys were at pretty soon.
Joe, I appreciate you having me. Give Monty a hug. Rex, if you see him, tell him I said hello.
I will. I will. And Monty's not a hugger. Hud, I'm afraid to hug. But, I'll pass it on.
We'll prod him in the ribs, whatever you need to do.
Just a little rib ball. All right. Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Goldberg, it's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.